Okay, my first talk today is assessing and developing citizen science projects. I'm calling it part one because I'm actually giving 3 talks today, and rather than thinking of that as 3 separate talks, I'm thinking of that as one talk divided into 3 parts. First of all, I'm going to give you a bit of background, and I call that citizen science by threes. I've always said that I break things down into threes because I can't remember any more than 3 things at a time. But I looked up the theory of threes on Wikipedia, that font of knowledge, last night, and it said that things in threes are funnier, more memorable, and they make the speaker appear more knowledgeable. So I thought, that sounds good. I'll stick with it. So I'll give you a brief introduction to citizen science and then talk about assessing projects. And this came about because of the Marine Parks program. And there was some funding for citizen science projects within that. And Duna wanted some help deciding what citizen science projects might be useful to run. So we started holding some workshops and really wanted to make sure that everyone had a common understanding of what citizen science is, what it can and can't do, and be able to compare projects, be able to improve projects, and avoid piecemeal development. So there were some projects that are similar across the state, there's some projects that are similar across the nation, and there are a lot of projects internationally that we can collaborate with and bring to South Australia, rather than developing our own projects here in South Australia. So I've been involved in citizen science for a long time, initially with Professor Chris Daniels. We ran a series of operations, and then, as Glenn introduced, through the Discovery Circle. And I'm running a number of projects now with a number of PhD students and collaborators on each of them. So citizen science by threes. First of all, a definition of citizen science. It's where professional researchers engage with the public to collect or analyse data within a cooperative framework of research and education. The 3 important words in that statement are engage, research, and education. Citizen science projects are about getting the community involved in doing the research, and some projects are focused on research, but I think all projects need to have those 3 elements in them: research, education, and engagement. And some projects focus on the research, that's the most important part of them. Some are about education, but they must also include engagement and research. And some are focused on the engagement, but they also must include research and education. And 3 great examples of citizen science projects are the Christmas bird count in the US that started in 1900 with 27 people looking at migratory birds, and last year, in the 115th year, had over 70,000 people involved in the project across North America. Horace is a project that looks at precipitation across North America and gets 7,500 precipitation reports sent in each day. And Galaxy Zoo is completely different. It's an astronomy project, and it's having the citizens analyse the data rather than collect it, because there's so many photos coming from space that astronomers don't have time to look at them all. So it gets the citizens to look at these photos online and say what's in them. So all of these projects have had fantastic research results and have published lots of papers in scientific journals. So there's good research results coming out of them, but also they're engaging lots of people. The Galaxy Zoo project, for instance, has engaged over 1 million people coming through that project. So continuing the theme of threes, I think it's really important in citizen science projects that we have a 3-way exchange of information. First of all, typically the scientist has a question and gives information to the community, asks the community to do something, collect some information or analyse some data, give that information back to the scientist, and then thirdly, the information goes back to the community and also can be published in findings and so on. It's also important to recognise that initial question might come from the community as well. So you can see there's that interaction in the first step. And there's lots of different ways of looking at citizen science. That's one way of looking at citizen science, but there's some particular styles of citizen science projects that, and in the US have been working on categorising them, and they've come up with this system of contributory projects, collaborative projects, and co-created projects. And most citizen science projects at the moment are probably contributory. And this is where the scientist is really after some data, and so it's focused on that step 2 of the process, where you tell the community what you want, but you really want them to do something and give it to you, and then you might give them the results. But more and more projects now are becoming more collaborative, where those ideas are generated together and then working with the community to collect data and then provide some results. And there are a few what I would call co-created projects, where working with the community at every step of the way to run a citizen science project, right from coming up with the idea, and often that idea will come from the community, and working out how to collect data, what sort of data to collect, what's important, and how to present the results, and getting the community involved in every step of the process. This is a slide I put together to demonstrate the difference between projects run by citizen scientists and projects run exclusively by scientists. I know there are 4 triangles on this slide, but they are 3-sided, so I'm sticking with my theme. So with a citizen science project, you typically have lots of participants. Down the bottom on the left, lots of participants. With a science project on the left on the top, you have fewer participants. In terms of training, scientists have lots of training. Citizen scientists often have very little training. In terms of the temporal or spatial scale you can cover, with scientists you're often limited by budgets or the number of people, but with citizen scientists you can increase those. But in terms of complexity, scientists can do more complex projects scientifically. Within citizen science, I think there are important 2 styles of projects to recognise, and the first one is large-scale projects, and these ones are where you're getting lots of people involved. They don't have much training, they cover a wide range sometimes, but they can't be very complex because of the training involved. The next is focused projects, and this is where you get fewer people involved. They can have more training. There's usually a reduction in scale because of the commitment in training and so on, but you can do more complex things with the community if you're doing a focused project. And then there's the no-go zone, where the projects are just too complex to consider involving citizen scientists in them, and it's really important to recognise where your project sits to help plan it. So in terms of research, citizen science can help us do large-scale research. It can get to inaccessible locations and gives us all sorts of different types of data. So that's a map of the Great Koala Count that we ran in 2012, and where people submitted either presence or absence of koalas. So you can see the few scientists that were involved in that project couldn't possibly have covered that sort of ground on one day. We got to inaccessible locations, people's backyards, and we collected both ecological data about where the koalas were, but also social data, which Juna wanted for putting together a policy on koala management, and the social data was the form of a survey that went out that night. In terms of education, I said there are 3 important things in citizen science: research, education and engagement. In terms of the education, we have informal education. People learn just by getting involved in the project, by hands-on doing something or by exchanging information with the scientist. In terms of formal education, that's in schools. Citizen science often gets into schools these days. And importantly, the education benefit is because there's both knowledge exchanged and there's something hands-on for people to do, and that's a really good way for people to learn. In terms of engaging the community, people like the citizen science projects because they're hands-on, they're contributing and they're fun. And I've found that citizen science, I've analysed 92 projects across Australia, and they have research outcomes, education outcomes, policy outcomes and an impact on the community. So looking at assessing projects, working with the Marine Parks team, we found there was a complex relationship amongst the team. There were stewardship people involved, a performance program and the NRM programs involved in marine parks. And there was a logic model about how that should all fit together to work on marine parks in South Australia. There were lots of ideas for existing citizen science projects to be increased or for new citizen science projects to be rolled out. So we came up with a project development assessment template to run through to make sure everyone had a similar understanding of the projects and could compare and contrast them and decide which ones would be beneficial. And then they were reviewed by the Marine Parks Coordinators Group with representatives from SMK, policy and planning in the regions to decide which projects were the best to continue. So there's a process to work through to decide which citizen science projects to use. The project assessment template has 3 parts. The first one is a project brief, where you look at the style of the project, what problem you're trying to address, what's the aim of the project, and describe the activities that will be involved in the project. The second part is looking at those outcomes for research, education and engagement, and how they align with the strategic goals of your department or your area. And the third part is assessing the individual parts of the project, like the engagement of scientists, how you do, citizen scientists, how you do that, what technology is required, what are the logistical requirements, how much commitment do you need from citizen scientists. We held a workshop yesterday and we worked through the template with about 20 people, and we found that it does enable people to do a rapid assessment of a citizen science project, so you should be able to fill this thing out in 15 or 20 minutes. It's useful for assessing and comparing projects to work out which sort of projects you should be running, and it ensures that the citizen science approach is considered really carefully. So all of those different elements that are important to citizen science are in the template, so you can think about how you might use the project and what it will achieve. People in the workshop said it was good to work with people outside of their region or their branches so that they got a whole lot of fresh ideas about projects. They found that they need to have better ways of finding collaborators to work on the projects, because you do need experts in a whole lot of different areas, in research, education and engagement in particular, to run a good citizen science project. So they wanted a good way to find those collaborators. They also felt there was a need for regular meetings and communication around South Australia to work on the best projects and where we should be going. And we're going to start that with Mensa, so the Monitoring and Evaluation Network, and looking at ways of having regular meetings each year so that people can be aware of what everyone else is doing, so we're not recreating the wheel and we're not creating similar projects in different areas. I've put the template online, and there's the web address down the bottom, so if anyone wants to download the template and use it, they're quite welcome to. Please provide feedback to us so that we can continue to improve the template, and I hope it's helpful in assessing and designing citizen science projects.